All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Facebook and YouTube Live. My name is Brandon Oliver, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at East Central ISD. And tonight we have another important Facebook and YouTube Live because we're going to be talking about planning ahead. We're talking about next year already. So you can't have a Facebook Live or YouTube Live with the superintendent without the superintendent. So I'm going to bring him on right now. Mr. Toscano, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great, Brandon. Good to see you. Welcome, everybody.
All right. So like I was saying at the top, East Central is preparing. We're planning, we're planning ahead. And so we're already looking at, 2021, 2022. And so, talk to us what's going on.
Yeah, so we're paying close attention to what's going on this legislative session, and there's several bills that are gaining some traction around allowing for remote learning as an option under certain circumstances. As I said last time we met, that all of this planning around potentially offering some aspect of remote learning for certain students next year is really contingent upon legislative action, giving TEA the authority, and then TEA granting us or allowing us the ability to do it. So everything that we're planning is because we don't want to wait until the last minute. We do believe that it's going to be highly probable that we'll be able to offer remote learning under certain conditions next year, especially because there's no pediatric vaccine that seems that is likely to be widely distributed before next year. So under those conditions, we know that there are circumstances where students have pre-existing medical conditions and or immunocompromised circumstances in the home, and that it may make sense for them to continue with remote learning next year. So we surveyed the community the last few weeks to gather interest in remote learning. And for all of those who indicated interest, we sent out applications. As we talked about last time, there will be an application process. And I believe we had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 800 students who indicated that they felt that remote learning would be their best option next year. There are several duplicates in those numbers, so it'll be slightly fewer than that. But we believe that while a minimal number, less than 10% of our population, it's enough of a number that we believe that if allowed to do so, we can accommodate in a remote format. So what I want to talk more specifically about today is just what will remote learning look like? What would be the expectations and the criteria and the process for approval, and just logistically how we're going to deliver remote instruction next year. And so just if you could, Brandon, just if you would pull up the timeline that we're working off of right now. So we're here today, April 1st, in our Facebook Live. You can see that above number 2 there, that our applications that all of you have received are due April the 9th. And that our plan is to then collect all of those and go through the approval process and notify parents by May 1st if they've been accepted. And we talked last time about the criteria, and that those criteria were going to be prioritized in order of importance. And number 1 being a demonstrated medical need. Number 2 being that your child thrived and demonstrated that they were able to thrive academically this year, and in particular in a remote environment. And then 3rd, that we're able to serve your child's academic needs in a remote environment. And then 4th, we would then, if necessary, look at other criteria such as, do you have access to Wi-Fi? Do you have access to technology? And or was your attendance or engagement, acceptable this previous year? So as far as medical approval for demonstrated medical need, I just want to continue to reinforce that that's not something administrators will do. We'll turn over the applications first to our medical professionals in the district, who will work closely with you to confirm that there is a demonstrated medical need. They'll sign off on step one and pass that along to campus administration to work through the academic qualifications and those others that I mentioned. Once approved, your child will receive a contract that essentially acknowledges the expectations, and some of those are going to be meant to just make sure that there's an understanding of not only the expectations, but kind of the logistics of how it's going to work and what some of the limitations might be for a child who chooses remote learning. So the contract is going to renew every semester. So if approved, the commitment would be for a semester, and then we would reevaluate at semester. And if the family wanted to continue with remote in the spring, then we would reauthorize if it was appropriate. I do want to note that at any time a child is not thriving in a remote environment, that will, if appropriate, consider discontinuing that remote option. I mean, ultimately, all of our goal is that your child is thriving academically and making adequate progress. The other thing is that you're going to need access to Wi-Fi. We distributed a lot of hotspots this year, and they were really a Band-Aid. We know that there's a lot of activity in the area and at the state level to make sure that Wi-Fi is treated like a utility that everybody has access to, and hopefully there's some progress made there. But ultimately, Wi-Fi is what is going to be required, broadband, high-speed internet, because our model is going to be synchronous only. So we won't be providing asynchronous instruction. We'll be expecting the student to be fully engaged and present in real time for synchronous instruction, and that their cameras are on and they're actively participating. And for that streaming level to occur and be reliable, Wi-Fi and broadband is optimal. We also expect you to have access to technology, a device, a laptop, and we do have the ability to check those out. This year we distribute them widely and broadly, but next year our intentions are that if you don't have access to technology and that's a limiting condition, we'll work with you case by case to determine if it's appropriate to check out a loaner. But generally speaking, we'll need to verify that you have broadband internet and access to technology. One other point that I want to make, while this would be a completely remote school option, there will be times on occasion that you'll need to come in for screening assessments and or testing, whether that's standardized testing or benchmark testing that we'll be administering in the district. There will be occasions where we'll need to coordinate that with you so that you'll be here in person for those circumstances. With regard to extracurricular participation, it's going to be limited. There are some programs and clubs that we offer for students that it would be appropriate to participate in remotely. But generally speaking, extracurricular participation is face-to-face, and we're going to limit extracurricular participation next year to those that are participating and attending in live face-to-face instruction. There will be a pathway to appeal that, and there will be some circumstances likely that it would make sense to make some accommodations there, but just know that the agreement will come with an accepting the understanding that the extracurricular participation will be limited. We will also do not intend to have any classes that are taught concurrently, meaning both face-to-face and synchronously. And so it will all be synchronous to the extent possible. In fact, most of the bills that are currently being filed prevent a district from offering any courses remotely where the teacher is expected to teach both face-to-face and concurrent. We have a little bit of concern with that because we do feel like there are a a very small number of exceptions, such as, AP Calculus. That's normally a class that does not necessarily have a large number of students enroll in any given semester or year. And, we feel like that could be a situation where it might make sense to offer concurrent instruction. Those are mature students, and that would enable us to make the course, if you will. But at this time, it's looking like it's unlikely that if remote instruction is approved, that we'll even be able to do that. So all instruction is likely to be synchronous only. We're also not going to be offering a hybrid option where a student comes face-to-face part of the week and experiences instruction remotely the other part of the week. There will be no hybrid option. Teachers will be assigned for face-to-face instruction, and then a limited number of teachers across the district will be assigned for synchronous instruction only. Our teachers will be remote teachers, those that are assigned to the remote learning environments, but we will not have a remote school or a virtual school, if you will. So, for example, if we get applications in and we approve for 22 first grade students, just as a for example, and we're allowed to serve students at that age group remotely, then we would assign a first grade teacher who goes through an application process within the district to teach that first grade cohort of students who might be first graders from all over the school district remotely. And that teacher might be a teacher assigned at, tradition, but might be teaching students again who are first graders all over the district. So you could expect to see that same model through elementary school. When we get into secondary, we're expecting to see situations where a sixth grade math teacher might teach, part of the day face-to-face, and then might have one or two classes where they're teaching remotely, but not at the same time. And so that's what we would expect to see the model look like through the secondary grade levels. We would also expect the possibility of remote learning classes potentially being a little bit larger for a couple of reasons. One, logistically, there's no space issues. There's no logistical issues with managing a larger number of students in a face-to-face environment. But also that's a way to guarantee that we could likely make classes and that be operationally efficient. And as new students move in, if they were to qualify for remote instruction, we could add to sections and potentially be able to serve those students as well. And so there is a high probability that remote learning classes might be a little bit larger student-teacher ratio. All remote teachers will have spaces or classrooms from which they would deliver remote instruction, and their equipment will be optimal. We've learned a lot during this pandemic, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from teachers at different grade levels throughout the system, and we've developed a package, if you will, for the remote teacher to have all of the equipment they need to really make a high quality synchronous learning environment possible. If in the event your child is going to return to face-to-face instruction from a remote learning environment, because of what I mentioned earlier, that they're likely to be in a class with students from all over the district at the same grade level, being taught by a teacher who may not be assigned to their school, that their return back would likely result in a teacher change and likely result in a quote unquote school change, because their teacher would not be from the same campus that is their neighborhood school. So just all of these things we want to be completely transparent about and clear about on the front end. We believe that still does provide an optimal option. It puts our teachers in the best situation and our students in the best situation to continue to thrive in a remote environment. And again, without a pediatric vaccine on the horizon in the near term, we believe that this is the prudent thing to do, is to prepare to be able to offer this to a very small population in our school system during that time period. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
All right, so we are going to do a Q&A here. Let me put that information up there for y'all. Just go ahead and comment if you have a question. But just to go back to it, Mr. Toscano, again, this is for next year, and the people that indicated their interest in that survey were the ones that received the application, correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
All right, and so let me bring up maybe the timeline one more time, just so people can, basically again see that they are due back April 9th, and under number or above number 4, May 1st is when the parents are going to be notified of acceptance and non-acceptance. So those are the dates, and April 9th is, that's right around the corner. That's next Friday. So, you definitely don't want to delay if that's something that you are interested in. Dana does have a question. She asked, what will special education services look like?
That's a great question, Ms. Lee, and we would work with you and your child to make sure that their IEP goals could be met completely in a remote environment. And so in many cases, we're able to do that with our programming. And in other cases, it may not, we may not be as capable. And so there would need to be some adjustments considered through the ARD process. And so there is no definitive answer there, only that we have the will and and we've advanced our position during the pandemic to be able to serve our special needs students remotely much better than we were at the onset of the pandemic. So we do have more options available to us. And again, we'll work with you on a case-by-case basis to determine our ability and the appropriateness of what we have to offer, given your child's needs.
All right, Denise asked, to clarify technology, do students need to have their own computer, or will there be a checkout for technology not to include internet hotspots?
Yeah, so our expectation would be that you have access to both technology and internet, but there will be an application, there'll be an option for requesting consideration for a loaner computer, and there will be some available for those who meet the criteria for that.
All right. Melissa asked, if we filled out the application, can we change our mind before school starts if we're accepted?
Well, thank you for asking that question. We hadn't really thought about that, but I will say there will come a time when the commitment needs to be firm for a semester, only because it has staffing implications. So I would say that if you filled out the application and you're notified of acceptance, that pretty quickly thereafter, you're going to have to give us a firm commitment. You can still back out if accepted, but it's a short window once you're notified. And we'll get more clear about that when we can process it a little bit more. But that May 1st date is going to give us a short turnaround for going through a process internally of identifying those who are going to be remote teachers at the various grade levels and subjects throughout the system. And we're going to need the better part of May to do that. And so we the in and out of students that we're trying to staff for, at some point we're going to have to cut that off. So I would say that within the week after notification, you're probably going to have to let us know one way or the other.
Okay, so we're talking like May 8th-ish, somewhere around there. That's a week after May 1st. So yeah, not a big window. So definitely want to have your mind made up for that. Roxanne, she said, I received the application. Am I needing to send you doctor forms for my child's health needs? And because my child is not eligible for vaccine, that is why she's wanting to keep her remotely.
Yeah, Ms. Rodriguez, you just submit the application, and a healthcare professional in our district will contact you, and you'll just work directly with them to make that decision. So you won't have to send any paperwork in with your application. You'll work through that in confidence with the healthcare professional.
And then, do we know what it's going to look like next year as far as like actually on campus? Do we know anything, maybe how that's going to look, masks, social distancing, any of that stuff?
Yeah, so hand hygiene, we believe, is here to stay. Distancing, we've already begun to see some relief of the distancing requirements, 6 feet down to 3 feet in classrooms from the CDC. I believe that it appears to be a trend that is going to continue, especially as the pandemic seems to be receding and the vaccine is being more broadly administered. As far as masks go, all of the indicators that we have been following since the onset of the pandemic are pretty clear about when normalcy can return. And we're actually on the fringes of what that data needs to indicate to return to normalcy, meaning that if conditions continue to improve the way that they are, it is a possibility that we'll have all of the scientific and public health data to substantiate requirements for hand hygiene, but recommendation for possibly distancing and clustering, and mask being an option. And again, that's just simply because that's what the public health guidance has indicated regarding this pandemic and prior pandemics, both nationally and internationally, and that's the data that we're using to make those decisions. So I think that it's going to be very likely in the fall that we're going to see risk mitigation a little bit more optional because the public health data suggests that that's appropriate. But of course, we won't make that decision without, the board won't make that decision without looking at public health data and the scientific recommendations based on that data, and they'll align to that. That's been their pattern since the onset of the pandemic.
Okay. Christina asked about school times. School times next year, are they going to change?
No, ma'am. Start and end times are exactly the same, but we will see the daily schedule change as we return more to a normal face-to-face environment. In other words, you won't see the asynchronous time blocks built in, especially in its most noticeable at the secondary levels where they've got big blocks of time at the beginning and end of the day for asynchronous instruction. That will go away. You'll see more of a traditional schedule throughout the school day, both for synchronous and face-to-face students. So the start and end will be the same though, however, Ms. Hernandez.
All right, and this next question, is a little off topic, but hey, we're here to help. So Bradley Thornton asked, what will it take for you to stop calling us every day about child nutrition? The phone calls are extremely excessive.
Appreciate that feedback, Mr. Thornton. And, it's valid because as a parent myself, I oftentimes find myself receiving a lot of call outs. We had especially during the onset of the pandemic, had a goal of really being transparent and communicating as often and frequently as we can, just to make sure that good information was out there and that there was no misinformation, and that again we were as transparent as we could be. But what that's translated into is some excessive redundancy in correspondence, and so we're currently looking at those things internally to try and clean some of those things up. And I'll certainly take a look at the communication that's coming out of child nutrition to consider making some adjustments there as well. So thank you for that feedback, Mr. Thornton.
And then this one's about host forums from Roxanne. How do we go about the host forum? Are they not doing face-to-face appointments?
So I believe our host forums are virtual this year, and so they'll schedule you for a virtual host forum meeting if that's necessary. Brandon, I don't know if you have more information about that through the registration page, but it might be useful to share all of that.
So host forms currently, they're housed over on the ECPD page. So ecisd.net/police. And then the navigation to the left, you'll see host forms. And then you'll have host form information here, including the actual form itself. So, you can go there and fill it out online. But again, it's ecisd.net/police. There's a frequently asked questions as well, and the host form requirements as well. And of course, you can always reach ECPD 210-649-2201, and they could definitely help you out with that. All right. So, Mr. Toscano, we're getting almost to the time at 30 minutes. I'll give it like another minute or two in case you're welcome, Roxanne. You're welcome. I'll give it another minute or two just in case a question rolls in. But I think just overall, this has been such a unique year. I mean, and then I know you've spent your entire career in education, specifically here in East Central. How how big of a change was this year? How big of a challenge was it compared to any other point?
There's always uncertainty. There's always things not going as planned, and there's always things that happen that you can't control in any given year. So we're certainly familiar with having to adapt and to make adjustments really quickly, but the scale of what we've experienced the last year is very different than what we're used to. On the other end of this thing, we've sure learned a whole lot about the way we do business. And, I would also say that we learned a whole lot about how we communicate with our community and our staff. And we've learned a lot of valuable lessons. I think we're better as a result. And, we're grateful for the community and staff really sticking together and being patient and working through our struggles, knowing that, we all want the same thing and that everything's going to be okay. And we're going to be thoughtful and wise and rely on guidance from expertise and others around the city, state, and nation. And that, as long as we do that, we can overcome whatever we're faced with. And I believe that's what we've done. So, anytime you go through a crisis in life, you don't want to waste it. There's valuable lessons learned. And at the end of the day, didn't like the pandemic, but I'm pretty grateful for the lessons we've learned.
I know two more, one for me and the one for someone else. So, I know like, at the higher education levels and things like that, they have virtual learning, there's actual virtual colleges and things like that. I think some parents wanted to see what virtual learning would look like for K through 12. But again, this was never planned to be a long-term solution. Can you just, maybe explain that a little bit more, to the families that might say, hey, I do like, virtual learning?
Yeah, so the agency gave us the authority to do this temporarily, and they've made it very clear to us, don't get used to it because this is not the way we're going to operate in public education in Texas. And so unless there are bills filed and subsequently passed through during this session that authorize the agency to allow remote instruction next year, it won't happen. And so, really what we're expecting is that there's the likelihood that they'll offer it next year. But once there's a pediatric vaccine, the likelihood of it being an option in the future is very low right now. What I was saying earlier about the lessons we've learned, one of those lessons is that some students, while a small percentage, actually do better in school remotely than they do face-to-face. These are students that we've had for many years in our system, and we're actually seeing that they're having their best year ever. And so, one thing about that we all aspire to do in public education is meet the needs of each individual child and to differentiate and customize the experience so that they reach their maximum potential. And, as educators, our argument is that in some cases, this is proven to be what they need. And so we'll see where that goes. But again, the powers that be at this point in our state are pretty firm on remote and, schooling being temporary.
All right, a couple did trickle in. My children currently attend Highland Forest. Can I apply at another elementary within the district?
Ms. Torres, you could. There is a process called an intra-district transfer, and I believe there may even be a request online, Brandon, through Student Services. But if not, you could contact John Hernandez at Student Services. We could probably also share that contact information, Ms. Torres, and just he can direct you through that process.
And actually, yes, it is ecisd.net, our website. Go to Family Resources, that tab right there, and then Student Transfer Request Form. And that was the request form that you can use if you want to go to another elementary within the district.
Yeah, and so generally, Ms. Torres, we would look at the age of your child, what grade level they're in, the grade level that we look at the grade level, the enrollment in the grade level in the school you want to go to, and the first requirement is that there's got to be room in the class without exceeding the class size requirement. At the elementary level, it's 22 students. So if there's space, then we can continue the conversation. If there's not, then we couldn't approve it. So that's kind of the beginning part of the process.
Terry Garcia asked, what do you recommend for a student returning to the district the next school year wanting to continue being completely virtual? Is that possible?
Yeah, Ms. Garcia, just if you fill out that application, submit it, and then we'll go through that approval process and communicate with you about whether that's possible for your child or not.
And Selena asked, will there be another Facebook Live before the STAR testing in reference to the remote students? People want more Facebook Lives, Mr. Toscano.
Ms. Brock, I understand why you're wanting more information there. So, we'll note that, and we'll make sure that we do a good job communicating how it's going to work for remote students. And if we need to have a Facebook Live around that, we'll do that as well. But testing's going to look a little different this year. And so we want to make sure everybody has good information and that they're not confused.
All right, we'll make this the last one. Nicole asked, has there been a change to how attendance is being taken at the high school level?
So if we're asking about can students still qualify as in attendance the same way that they have all year? In other words, if they're synchronous and they log in face-to-face live, they're here. If they're face-to-face, obviously they're here. If they're not there in person and they don't log in to class that day, but within 24 hours, they've submitted evidence of doing their work and engaging in the work asynchronously, then they can also be counted as present. That has not changed. As far as logistically how we're going through that accounting process on the teacher side, we've been making some adjustments to make it more efficient as we've begun to implement a new student information system. And back to the previous question about STAR that I believe Ms. Brock had, another option in the meantime, Ms. Brock, is to contact your campus. And every campus has a little slightly different logistics. You could get, there's Ms. Gomez stating that. Yeah, just contact the campus and you might be able to get your specific questions answered. But again, we'll continue to push out clarifying information.
All right, so that brings this particular episode to a close. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, and we, help it. Hopefully, it was informative. I think it was. And if you need to go back and watch this, you can at any time on our Facebook and YouTube. This video will live there forever, so you can always go back and watch that. Yes, sir.
One more thing for Miss Cruz, who asked the attendance question. Please contact your campus principal to make sure that your child's attendance is accurate. Sometimes there are some human error or some mistakes that happen, and we want to make sure we get that right. So touch base with your child's principal, give them a chance to take a look at it and correct it if there are any mistakes.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Mr. Toscano. We appreciate it. And let's see, it was April 9th, right? Was the due date for applications. May 1st, y'all, is going to be when you will hear something based upon those applications. And so get them in. So,
All right.
Everybody, have a good evening.
Have a good evening. Thank you all.
We'll see you next time.